noticed in the 215 class, there was some, like the meeting wasn't recording and it looked like it was paused or pending. So I really don't know what's going on with that. Okay. So, yeah, so here with this. So I had a few questions with about the lab that was due last night. And like I said before, I really expect people to reach out and ask me questions about the lab, unless you're like super diligent on everything and reading the book 100% and going through the assignments that I mentioned in class. You may have problems. And so I encourage you to reach out to me and we can work through those because I can provide you feedback on your labs that say, okay, hey, this is what you need to do, or this is what you want to look at. And that may be okay or good enough, but again, I encourage you to, even as a team, to reach out to me, and I will help you out. What else was that? Yeah, so just do that. Okay, so what we'll do is really, I think, I don't want to say if I hadn't mentioned this or haven't really stressed this. Here's module 2. I guess we're already here, right? And this is this functions as our Moodle, right? As far as like, what are we doing? What should we be doing? That's a better way of looking at it. What should we be doing? And this is what we should be doing. For this module, right, we have these items, right? So define static member variables, use friend function classes to access private members. And again, this at least the second one there, dovetails nicely off of what we introduced to 205, which was the ADTs and structures. And, we had pretty much any access we wanted, but now we want to control that. Aggregate classes into other classes. And like we said, we don't need to work with that, implement it. It's just we need to know what it is. And that was one of the last sections we talked about. And then this is really the last piece, and this is chapter 15. Right, so chapter 15 is really no more than one section. And again, here it's a case of, inheritance. We have to know what it is, and we have to look at an example of it. And trying to think here. Yeah, we'll be using it, so we need to work with that. So I will take today, we'll talk about it, we'll look at an example, and then I'll open up the last lab, and this will be the last lab for teams in that, working with a partner. For the rest of the course, you're certainly more than welcome to work in groups, keep your same team, and but what you don't want to do there is you don't want to have just one person doing everything and then the other person does nothing. That's a terrible approach. So if you do work in the teams, again, I encourage you to meet with me to talk about what we're doing. All right. Now, before we get to that, we have this other thing here, and you guys got to help me out with where you're at or what you need. So if I go here and I don't want to do this. I want to add a tab. I just want to look at 4 more. If I look at the assignments, all right, this week, Mod 2 Lab 1, that's due in a week. And again, this is the sales thing. And just like with the fine if you see this. It doesn't matter. Nobody's done anything with it. You know, again, it's a pretty big lab, and it models very closely to the example that's in the textbook. So just like the die class could have been used, and I mean you really needed to. I mean, I didn't want you to rewrite everything. The die class was used for the Dart stuff. On this last lab, the same thing with this, right? Where you're using that the two classes, I think it's the billing and the something else. I'm gonna say auditing, but what's the other finance term? Begins with A, not accounting. It's budget and something. Those two. Yeah, if I go to files here, it should all be up here, and these are in chapter 14. And again, you have to do a little digging around to find what these examples are specifically. Budget version 1, 2, 3. This probably, yeah, and auxiliary. Okay, I guess that's not really a marketing term, but anyway, you want to use these, and these are talked about in the textbook. We looked at them, worked with them a little bit. And again, you want to go through these on your own, upload them into your own private repository, work through them until you see how everything connects, and you can put in some test data there and test out the member functions of each one of these classes or both of these classes. So you can see how they work with one another. You'll then be able to, again, make some adjustments to these files to make them work for you in the lab we were just looking at. And that's this guy. So I don't want to say, before we kind of go ahead and work ahead, I don't know what we left off with on, it would have been Friday, right? I don't know what we left off with on Friday. So what did we leave off with on Friday? Like how did we leave it? Because I don't know, did that video download? Or did it just go away?
I can see it getting bigger in the size, but no Wi-Fi speed.
Well, I don't know then. I don't know why it doesn't want to download for me. Maybe it just doesn't like me. I don't know. But like I said, I can't really figure out what, where did we leave this? Did we say, okay, Thursday will be our work day? I really don't know. I know Friday was a long time ago. Okay.
Yeah, I thought we just broke up into our teams and worked on.
That was Friday, right? Yeah, Friday we broke up into teams. And every team I popped into, it sounded like everyone had a pretty good handle on where they were at. But then again, you could have just been telling me that. Well, like I said, I mean, we might as well throw it all on the table and then let the chips lay as they will. So let's do that. All right. So if that's the case, here's what we got. Yep. But at least I don't have to determine what pictures have traffic lights in it. Okay. All right, let's go to my library. And if you haven't, if you didn't know, this was the textbook. Extremely, yes, it's very extreme there, Mondo. Totally extreme. That's fine, dude. I don't want to say we haven't even done anything yet, but yeah, we really haven't. We just talked for a little bit, so you didn't miss much. Okay, so, yep. And, you know, I've obviously mentioned this before, but I cannot stress enough the importance of reading the book here. And really, when I'm like, read the book, like, don't read the whole thing, right? What I've done for us is went through and identified at least like important things. What's that? That we should be looking at. I'm on the general tab. Where is, oh yeah, because you got to go into the individual modules, right? So again, just in case you missed this, Mondo, notes, the notes tab, this should tell you what you should really focus on, right? So like I don't want to say at a minimum, but yeah, you need to read over that. And even like the budget 3 example that we looked at under the files tab in the class materials folder, you know, the budget and auxiliary classes may not even be in those sections. So just the FYI, just like with the die class. Okay. So again, this is what I'm going to look at, and then we'll have everything we need for Module 2. So that chapter comes right after 14, and it's 15. And this is it. This is honestly, this is the last chapter from this book that we really need to know about. Okay? And because I think I mentioned you want to read those sections in the book, and I pointed this out last Friday. And really, it's just this first one. So it's only like 11 pages, and there's probably a lot of pictures in here. And, you know, not all of that stuff, even though it's great to know about. But again, we need to focus on this first thing and know what it is. Because I'm sure, yeah, it kind of just jumps right into an example, doesn't he? Yeah. Okay, so that is 15.1. Any questions? No, we'll look at it a little bit more detail here. Yeah. Okay. And there we go. Dun dun. From, wait, primary, okay, from the current. Awesome. I'll make that a little bigger. Okay, cool. So what's awesome about this chapter? Well, these are all like pretty advanced topics. And like I said, we're really going to focus on inheritance. We'll make a mention of polymorphism and virtual functions. And again, just like aggregation, I mean, they're nice to know. It's like the icing on the cake. But we'll be okay with just the first one. So what is it? Very generally, or just very basically, inheritance is nothing more than if you have a class that's based off of another class. That's it. You know, when we're talking about code reuse, if I had this very general class that has some like built-in functionality, and you know, I want to extend that out, it's like, well, I want everything that's already there. Right, and that's again why you know, why we were working with the die class, and we're just kind of like changing that a little bit. Because in our main program, maybe we put a couple functions in there to do some specialized things. But now we're talking about, okay, well, we have this base class that's pretty generic, and then I want to extend it out. So that's what inheritance is. It's just making a class based on another class. The nice thing is that, just like we said, that class, ooh, I don't know if it should, you know, it should be calibrated because that's the same resolution as that over there. I don't get it. If I want to draw a picture, I got to do this, I guess. Yeah, well, why don't you put it over there? So if you have a class, and we'll call this class A, and then we have class B. Well, the cool stuff is, or the cool thing is, that all the functionality of class A is inherited down here. So you have the same functionality. You inherit all the, member variables, all the member functions. So you have essentially everything that was in class A and class B. That makes sense. The only thing you don't have or you don't inherit would be a constructor, like making a new object. And it kind of makes sense because if I'm going to put in, maybe a new member variable for class B, which makes sense, like I would want to do that. I can't create a new object without creating this new stuff that I put in there. So like those are not inherited. Same with the deconstructors, right? And of course, in like newer iterations of C++, you have more cool stuff. So starting with C++ version 11 there, which is quite a while ago, you can optionally inherit some of the constructors of the class it is based on. So, if you have some overloaded constructors, like you can maybe inherit some of those. Again, if they match up as far as the number of variables there. And there's some other stuff, but again, just so if you see that, you don't be like, well, wait, I thought I didn't inherit those. Okay. More about what is inheritance. So it provides a way to create a new class from an existing class. We've already established that. The new class is a specialized version of the existing class. Makes sense. And I really like this, and this is a nice illustration here for us. Talking about a specialization. If we put it in terms of insects, right? He wants to talk about, I think, in like the study of insects, like epithemology or something, etymology, it's like etymology. I don't know, what is it? I thought it had a P in there.
You're probably thinking of epidemiology.
I don't know, but the study of bugs. Entomology. We have some scientists among us. But if we put it in these terms, I know this is like a random term, like we looked at houses before with windows and stuff, but we know that like all insects are probably going to have certain characteristics. And we can see that there's two different types of insects, like there's a bee over here and a grasshopper. Well, it's like, what do they share? And maybe you would say, well, they can move, right? We would hope. I mean, maybe there's, I don't know, is there an insect that doesn't move? I don't really know about that. So then if we think about, okay, there's an insect that can move, so we could put in there in the built-in class, like if we have all, and I'm not gonna be able to, but all certain insects are all certain things that they share, we could say movement. And there is a reason why I'm saying movement, because when you're going to do the next lab that we have, you have to make that consideration. Like, okay, this base class, no matter if you're X or if you're Y, movement is going to be something that's going to be in both classes. Same with, like they probably have to eat, right? They need fuel, so there's certain things that both of them are going to have. I don't know, maybe this explains a little better. Like the bee over here, in addition to common insect characteristics, the bumblebee, well, let's talk about having some unique things, right? Specializations, if you will. But again, focusing on the insect, What are other things you guys think that they may have as far as all insects would have? Movement, they have to eat, what else?
Lifespan, maybe?
Oh, yeah. So they have a lifespan. See, that's a good characteristic right there.
But you said they all look creepy.
They all look creepy. Uh,
Agreed.
yeah, what was it? Yeah, they all look a little weird. Ben agrees. But I like that. They have a lifespan. So, they're like these living things, they're living organisms. They have a lifespan, and we could probably measure that, right? In either hours, days, months. So that's a characteristic that they would all share. That's a really good one. I didn't even think about that. They all, okay, and, right, you could think creepiness could be a measurement too, or some characteristic. What's the level of creepiness? Is it like 0, none, and then like 10, a lot? And that's something you could measure, right? They all don't have to be measurements, however. It could just be something like a yes and no, characteristics could be like flight. Do they fly? Well, obviously, one of these is going to have that, one of these is not. So then you got to think, all right, should I put that as a characteristic shared among all insects, or should that just be something I implement down lower within the individual class, which makes it a specialization? So you have to make that decision. I'm going to tell you right now that the more stuff you put in that base class, the less flexible it becomes, and less really usable. So you do want to make sure that you are thinking about what should be in the base class versus what should all be in the child classes. Okay, so there is a relationship between the base class and the derived class. So, the grasshopper and the bee here are derived from the insect class. So how we would say that is a grasshopper is an insect, and a bee is an insect, right? And you'll see when we look at the lab that I'll open up here, that relationship will also make sense. Okay, well, now we have to, we're working toward looking at a real example, not just like bugs. So this is a relationship, or sometimes is and, right? Is and, depending on if it's at the next, in this case, class, would be start with a vowel or not. So, right? I only know a few things from English, and this happens to be one of them. If it's is a, that means the next word is a consonant, right? Like an example, a poodle, a car, a flower, a football. They don't have anything else. And insect, right? Not that this is English class, but at any rate, it's just is a relationship. So a poodle is a, oh, I'm sorry. No, they don't have any. Is and, oh, they do have the last one. A, right? A football player is an athlete. Ironically, well, I don't even say anything, but the president did send out an email about something like that, so you can use your own, think of your own joke to put in there. Okay. So, but you can see here, right? So this is cool. Like even the first one, the poodle is a dog. I could also say, and unfortunately, I'm not very well versed in domesticated animals, but a terrier, I guess, I think I've heard that before, is a dog, right? So you can see what the derived class is: poodle, terrier, wiener. I don't think that's the real name. Dachshund, something like that. Those are all types of dogs, and it is a relationship. So if I'm looking at this, what's the base class? Pick any of them. It's probably a vocab question.
Base class will be everything to the right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so everything to the right, everything at the end of all these examples, and then the derived class is the other thing. All right, good deal. All right, so let's put this in terms of like programming instead of all this fuzzy, this fuzzy stuff, warm and fuzzy stuff. So let's read this over real quick and see what we can make heads of it. Okay, so base class or parent inherited from derived class or inherited from, whoop. So that's like all one sentence. Inherited from, you're inheriting from the base class. A derived class or child inherits from the base class. And of course, our favorite relationship, the parent-child relationship. For me, it's a lot in programming. Great. What's the notation? Well, we can see the base class at the top there, class student. And now we have a derived class or a child class called undergrad. And you can see what the notation is, public student. So that means you're going to inherit anything from that student class. I have some more information for you before we get going too far. And I mean, it gets, again, the sense, then I could make a class called graduate, which would make sense, right? Because then it's going to have all the same attributes as student. Hold on to that thought. Okay. Now, it appears that maybe the undergrad class would have access to the public member variables and functions. That's correct. That is why it's important to have accessor, and mutator functions that change those private, and better make sure, private data members for the base class. So that's why it's like, yeah, you put in private members up here in the student class, but to access those, to modify them, how do I do that? I need accessor and mutator functions. So that's why that's like, we need to have those in there. Because I said, you can see your public student, I only have access to those public either member variables or member functions. Think of it in the sense of it's like you're copying the whole class and like throwing it in this example, the undergrad class. Again, the derived class, meaning the child class, does not have direct access to private data members or functions. The way to allow this, if you want to allow that, is to create a different access specification called protected, which we won't be covering in this class. Hey, all right, you're welcome. So if I want to make them protected, instead of like private and public, we make protected. As long as it's a derived class, you would have access to it. They still function as private. You don't have direct access to them, but you can if you're a derived class. And again, we're not covering this that in this class, so you don't have to worry about it. Okay, so with that being said, Jess, do you have a question?
I was just gonna ask, that's all we have to do is use the colon in public student? And we don't have to use anything like the word extends or? That's what I did in Java, I didn't know.
See, and that's a good question, but the key word here is student. You have to have access to those files. So at compilation time, those files need to be in there because you're referencing them. So as long as they're in there, yeah, you can do that.
Okay.
You don't have to do anything in your base class like, hey, allow this friend to access or anything like that, right?
Is that a lowercase s that we're going to use instead of uppercase?
Well, seeing that I don't really like, because we should.
It should be uppercase.
It should be, and I don't know why Tony decided not to do it that way. I think that was just maybe a typo. Because how else, I mean, how else do we know? Are we talking about some other class that's lowercase student versus one that's uppercase student? So I think that's just a typo here.
Okay.
I don't know why that's like that. Again, these are slides from, you know, I don't think Tony went through and verified all this content. He had someone else do it for him. Okay. Cool. And let us see. All right, so an object of a derived class is a or an object of the base class. Makes sense? So example, if I want to read it this way, I can say an undergraduate is a student. Makes sense? A mammal is an animal. And then we already said this, but a derived object has all of the characteristics of that base class. Yep. All right, so we want to look at like an example, right? So let's read this and look at an example, and then that's going to be pretty much it. What does a child have? Well, an object of the derived class has all members defined in the child class, all members declared in the parent class. Okay, that makes sense. An object of the derived class can use all public members defined in the child class, and then all public members defined in a parent class. Okay. So let's look at an example of how this actually works. Okay. We'll continue without a code. Must be is that an update? Live share is available. Update. That's nice. Okay. All right, so let's open up some solutions. Let's see what the answers are. All right, so here are the answers. Okay, so what do we got? We got that, and we got this. So it's employee and production worker. So just looking at the naming, see how the naming really makes sense, because looking at that, I can tell which is my base class and which is my derived class. I would never use, like we use the example of class A and class B. That's insanity. What's the sense in that? But at any rate, it's easy to see the relationship here. The production worker is an employee, right? It makes sense. Say logically, but grammatically. I have two implementation files there, or really one implementation file, the class production worker. So probably employee has a lot of inline stuff going on with it, right? As I can see here. And, you know, there's no specification here because these are, a lot of them are just accessors and they're just really accessors and mutators, right? So here's all your accessors, here's all your mutators, and that's it. So you can kind of see this class is just kind of this outline, really, of what an employee should have. If I go in and do just a direct comparison with production worker, you know, I can see a couple of additional things that extend it out, right? Like get, shift, name. Because it makes sense. If it's a production worker, somebody working on the floor, and again, this is putting in the sense of like, you know, we have to keep track of their times, whereas an employee could also be salary, right? So if we're talking about a manager, well, that would be a nice class to have a nice derived class from the employee class, and it wouldn't have this. It wouldn't have get shift number, right? But it would probably have other stuff. Like the pay rate, it wouldn't make sense to have that for somebody that's, you know, salary, because they don't get paid per hour. So again, look, you know, and from here, it's like I don't have, you know, it's, where's everything else? What I mean by that, where's everything else? Everything else is over here, right? Because, you know, hopefully all our employees have names. So again, going back and forth, you can see why this is the base class and the production worker would be the derived class. You know, because hopefully if they're an employee, they probably had a date at which you were started, right, or when they were hired. So it looks pretty, I don't want to say generic, but that's kind of the whole idea here. So, up through this. This is where, you know, even if I, you know, well, I want to see, you know, where employee implementation pile, right? I don't have, you know, nice access. Like it's going to not this file, not this class. So I can't use my little, hey, how do I look ahead? So it's like I have to know where those class files are, or there's implementation or specification files. If I do this, I want to go here, and I want to go into, here's how I can make the connection, if you will. If I go into the implementation file for production worker, and I open this up, you'll see this is the, wait. Okay, I need to actually go to where the driver is here, which is this file. All right, so here's like my main program, right? Ooh, it's a programming challenge. And we want to, production worker, wait a minute here. Okay, so this is how we can do it. Class production worker, a worker. So now I want to go down to, I think I'm going to go to the declaration in a new file there. Yeah, see, well, that just jumps me over to that. Yeah, either one of those. So this is kind of the way that it's, you know, I'm going from this file down into my specification file that then I can go down into my implementation file. So if I trace this out, right, I can see that, okay, class production worker, but we said that this is key for us because this drills down even further, right? Public employee. You know, and again, you can do just the, if you want it in line here, but if I want to go to where it's defined, then I can see, all right, well, I have these variables privately, But in order to set them, how do I set them? Right, like name, number, hire date. Well, name, set number, set hire date, right? So, when in essence, when I'm creating here, when I'm creating a, well, that's just displaying it. How about like actually creating it? Well, let's talk about displaying it first. Production worker, that's great, but again, we're tracing it down to here. Production worker, that's the implementation. Production worker, but we know that we have more stuff to it than just what is ever in. Let's close this. Beyond these two variables, right? Name. So when I say worker dot get name, well, if I go to this file here, and I'm, because again, it's production worker, and I'm looking for get name, mutators, accessors. Do you see the problem there? The problem is I don't have a member function called get name. Like, where is that? So again, this is where it's like I have to know that this is a derived class. So then I need to go to employee and look at that class to see that, yep, and we're saying get name. And where it's hard to wrap our heads around is that get name is not a member of production worker, it's a member of employee. But if I'm back in my main program to refer to a worker, it's just like, yeah, that's, again, a public member function that I have access to. So worker.getName works just fine. Now, what we've been doing is just at this level. So in our class, in this class production worker, well, I'd have a function called getName. Well, we don't have that anymore. But you see how we have direct access to it? Because when the object was created up here, we know we put a name in there. So we know that there probably is a name. And really, I mean, you can see how small, or I would say small, but how simple this program is. PW is our object back here in our main program, but then when I'm down here and I go to display info, PW is really what it is for probably production worker. So every time I'm saying worker dot, it's PW dot. And again, what I would do is this, even at this level, again, single right click, beep, and I would put my little breakpoint in here, and then I would do it this way. So I would do a F5, get this going. Hopefully this works. And I don't want to say we don't care, but we really don't care what's going on there in the console window. Now we say, okay, let's F11 this bad boy. And let's step into the constructor. And then all this stuff going on, if I hit my F11 again. All right, yes. You see how I'm drilling down now into the employee class, right? And now, this is where I'm like, guys, you really need to, set, we're not going to see this until we go one more line in. But you see how it's John Jones, a number, right? 1, 2, 3 for the date, I guess. And we're going to assign all those values. And again, just walk through this, right? So then I come back, those values that I just had. Now we're going to go down into the production worker, or come back to it, and then we need to display information for it. For PW, and like this is really important, guys. How do I do? Shoot. Man, you gotta be like super fast on this. So why don't I just pin this? Okay. So this will make it a little bit larger for us. All right. And then, right. And you see how I can expand all this stuff out? Now, it makes a little bit more sense as far as, okay, PW, production worker. But I have this base class, which again has all these variables, name, number, hire date. And again, you can see the nice little lock by them, right? Because remember we talked about that with the friend classes and stuff. So it's a private member variable of the employee class. But again, it's included in that object. So again, very helpful just to step through it, expand this stuff, add variables to watch lists, trace them through, really get your head wrapped around how your objects are created. What else was that? Okay. Nah. Okay, so the big thing with this is, again, opening the files up, you will need to do the same thing in your lab, which is I have a base class, something like this. Again, it has a basic functionality. Then you're going to have a derived class, and really, I think I make it really tricky for you. You actually have to do two of them. So you have to do two derived classes. But the thing is build one first, and then make a copy of it, right? So, because you're going to have the same stuff, you're just going to like add in or change a couple things, right? So once you have it all set up, once you have nice things labeled here, make a copy of it and then make your second derived class. Pretty much it. Okay, now, looking at the time, we started this class an hour ago? Really? Oh, well, I'll be darned. And survey says we have 15 minutes left. So let's really, I don't want to say let's turn up the heat, but let's really make things interesting. Because all this great stuff, and then that's it. Copyright, you can read that if you want. What I want to talk about is this guy. And that would be, not here, but over here. So I'm pretty excited about this. And that is this last lab. So this is, I want to say it's a stepping stone to the rest of the class, because the rest of the class is all downhill from here. It's really super easy. I don't think so. I think it maybe gets a little harder. But at any rate, I really like this lab. I think it's really cool. You'll have to let me know your thoughts after this. Oh yeah, you got module 2 homework. What's that? I don't know. We should probably do it. Let me look at it real quick. Oh yeah, you guys could do that too. When should we end module 2? I don't know, sometime in October. Let's see. That stuff's due the 5th, so the 12th. And yep. So just assign that, and you should get a little notification there. And the Module 2 homework is really just some questions. You go up, Microsoft Forums, go there, answer some questions. Module 2 homework, October 12th, so that sounds like a good due date. But we said we wanted to look at Module 2, Lab 2. So let's look at this. And before we assign it, let us pick a date. Not December.
That looks like a good date to me.
What?
December looks like a good date to me.
No. 11:59. See, that's what. You know that. Why is it? This looks like a scroll bar to me. So okay, well I gotta pick 11:59 p.m. that day. Okay. All right, so post notifications on the general channel. Did you want them there? Does that work for you?
Yeah.
All right. It's a typical programming assignment, and let's assign it. And let's talk about it for a quick minute. All right, so we already talked about what the homework is, right? That's you just some questions that we should know, and probably one of them is like, what is inheritance? That kind of stuff. Well, I guess before we look at that, maybe we'll do this at the end. After you guys go through inheritance, we'll talk about polymorphism and virtual functions. So that'll kind of, again, like I said, be the icing on the cake. Let's not get overwhelmed. Let's just focus on what we're about here, which is Module 2, Lab 2. And let's look at the, that's a nice view right there. So what is this? You're writing a program for an eccentric group of individuals that collect transformers from the TV animated series of the same name that originally aired in the 1980s. Your program is, or will, prompt the user to answer how many of each type of transformers they have, animal or vehicle. So right there in my head, I'm thinking, okay, if I'm going to have two derived classes, right, kind of goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway, your derived classes here will probably be animal and vehicle. The base class then, and you don't have to call it transformers. I mean, you could call it something else. You could call it, I don't know, toys. I don't know, maybe, whatever. I mean, it's up to you. Okay, so and then based on the response, the program will create new objects. Okay, so here's the, I don't want to say a caveat, but here's the thing. If I see the word new somewhere, I'm probably thinking the word delete goes along with it, right? And then I'm thinking, okay, I got to have a deconstructor to destroy that dynamically created object. And yes, you're absolutely right. So you need to have deconstructors there. So for this lab, you have to have that. The menu should have an option. Okay, so you got to think too, and you may have to go back to previous examples that you've done in like 205 to see, or just look online and get an example of displaying a menu, So after everything you do, you should always be displaying a menu. Because when we're down here, well, at any time. So you should be able at any time while the program's running to be able to display what I've got in there so far. So how do you do that? Well, basically, after everything you do, you just pop up the menu, make a selection, and make a selection until they say, I want to get out of here, and I'm done. So you're going to design, I guess I tell you what to do. Oh, sorry. So you don't have any flexibility there. Your base class should be called, it says design a class named transformer that stores the following information. So you can see here the name, because we'd like to have all our transformers have a name, and then the type. Because if you're a transformer, you have to pick a side. right? And then obviously the stereotypical sides here are good and evil, are good and bad, or Autobot and Decepticon, respectively. And then the movement. So the movement, each one of them has to move somehow. Otherwise, it would be a pretty boring show to watch if the Transformers just sat there and did nothing. Right? Nobody wants to watch that. And then everyone does damage. Because again, if they're not blasting each other with lasers, there's nothing to look at. You just have two robots staring at each other. Okay. So then this gives you a whole bunch of other information that is helpful. Write a default constructor and a constructor to initialize the name and type. And then also, this is going to be, again, within the transformer base class, name and type, and the appropriate accessor mutator functions, because again, those are going to be private member variables of our class transformer. So we need accessor and mutator functions, so we can update and change those from like our main program, our driver program. These can be done in line. So you can do some shortcuts here because it kind of makes sense. If I'm just setting them, it's like a lot of repeated information. So here's where I'm letting us have some flexibility there, but not for all of them though. And we'll see that in a little bit. Prompt the user to input either an A or D. Okay. And then write a class named vehicle that's derived from transform. The vehicle class should have member variables to hold the following information: the vehicle type, the weapon, and skill. And again, weapon, what? Laser beam. It's kind of up to you on what that is. I mean, you want to use that as a string. I would say just use a string for all this stuff, except maybe, well, the skill. Let's see if I specify that. I don't really specify that anywhere. Oh, wait. I guess I do right afterwards. Write a default constructor and a constructor to initialize the vehicle type, weapon, skill. Okay. And the appropriate accessor mutator functions. These can be done in line with the specification file. Then there should be really a space here, right? After this sentence, there should be a space because it's saying like write another class. And it's pretty much rinse and repeat. The difference here that makes it a little different from the vehicle class, okay, is this. You may have a little bit of difficulty with this part right here. If the animal, right, because we're saying vehicles and animals. If the animal is an Autobot, then the group member variable should be Dinobot. Now you need to build this into your class. It's not like you're going to ask this eccentric group of users that collect transformers, hey, is this an Autobot or Dinobot? Because they assume, meaning the person that's collecting these, like my program should know if well, it should prompt me because I want to differentiate the two. So I need to know, is it a Autobot? And it's got to be based on, I'm sorry. If the animal is an Autobot, then it's automatically this, okay? You don't have to prompt the user for that because you already know that you created an Autobot, so then your program has to say that, okay, it's a Dinobot, like duh. Similarly, if it's a Decepticon, then my program should know that it should be a Predacon. So this is where you have to build some functionality into your class, specifically the animal class, that makes some assumptions based on current values. And I can tell you right now, it's as easy as an if statement, really, okay? But again, I would imagine With everything else, you can do everything else. This might be a little bit of a problem. I have no problem in talking to you about it. This is why we should have conversations outside of class. And everything else. Now, continue to prompt for valid input. We really haven't talked much about, input validation, but please put something in there. A while loop, while cn.fail, right? Meaning my data type's not matching up with the data type I expect to see, or while it's not equal to this or that. And if you're like, what are you talking about? Again, have a conversation with me. And you don't have to submit anything if you do it in Azure. Which, by the way, if you were getting, and I'll talk more about this in the 305 class, but if you're getting a specific error with the permission, it has to do with, again, the fact of you're trying to sync a database file, and a database file is like always open, so it's like the right handle on that file, the writing handle, like to write to the file, is like open, it's never closed, so you really don't have permission to like sever that connection. And again, so if you're having problems with Azure, you send me a screenshot, I can look at it. I think I have most of them figured out, but I don't know, there's always something new, right? Okay, that leaves us 4 minutes of class. I don't know, is there another class right after this at 12:30 then?
At 12:45.
Oh, so we have like a half an hour break, so we can go right to the time. I could clean your tables off when you guys leave, so don't worry about that. Any questions about this, like clarifying? You may not have them now because you haven't went through the examples that we just looked at today, that again are talking about inheritance and the base class and deriving class. Maybe perhaps you haven't read the chapter 15.1 or that section. So you really are like, I have no clue. Okay, well then now you need to read that section in the textbook, have went through the other examples, and you got to talk with me. But I guess generally, are there any questions? General questions? Well, here's a good question for you guys. Like, has anybody ever seen, well, they made the Transformer movies, right? Anybody see those? Right? And they have like the good guys and the bad guys, it's the same idea. So after you write this program, you can probably email Michael Bay and see if he could use it. Maybe he has a fan base there that, yeah, I have, I had like every single cartoon. They made cartoon movies, like way back in the 90s. Watched all those. But pretty cool. I think this will be fun. Should be interesting. If you really hate Transformers and you want to do something else, I mean, you could honestly substitute in just as easily the example we looked at today, insects, right? And then you could be insects, do they fly or crawl or swim? I mean, so you should be thinking in your head, like, I can abstract all this and make it really whatever I want. That's why I said, you really don't need to say the Transformer class. It could be something actually more generic. And if you want to change that, if it helps you to kind of separate this out and make sense, you could call it something else. That makes more sense to you. I'm fine with that. Even though I say you need to design a class name Transformer, I'm pretty flexible. You guys know me by now. If you don't know me by now, you'll never, ever know me. Okay, that's 2 minutes remaining. I think there's anything else I need to mention. I'll just do those things, which is read the book, go through the examples, specifically the one we said today. You've got to really work on the Module 2 Lab 1 stuff. That's going to be due on Monday. Email me your code as you're working on it. I guarantee you, if you do that, I can provide you with valuable feedback to help you kind of along your way. So, definitely do work through some of this on your own. I'm not saying email me so I can walk you through doing the whole assignment, but definitely, if you're not able to bounce too many ideas off your teammate, then by all means, let me help out. Wow. Cool beans. All right, guys. So on Thursday, we will take some time, just like we did last Thursday. We'll be working in our groups. I'll maybe mention a couple of things. Hi, how you doing? We'll break into our groups. What you may want to do, because I know a lot of people like to call, well, I'll talk about that on Thursday. But I want to try and make that as efficient as possible to help as many people out as we can. But email me and let me know what you have. So otherwise, we'll talk to you guys on Thursday, and have a good one. All right, let's see, it's still recording here. So if I stop sharing, which I did, see, it doesn't, okay.